Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to AuthorStory. I'm Alexander Lim, your host. And for this episode, I'm interviewing Winifred Reilly, author of the book It Takes One to Tango: How I Rescued My Marriage with Almost No Help from My Spouse, and How You Can Too. And for those of you following along who are interested, you can go over now to the Amazon link in the description below the video and check out or get a copy of her book. So, Winifred, welcome to AuthorStory. Thanks for being our guest.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, cool. So, Winifred, tell us first a little bit about yourself. What's your author story?
Um, okay, so I am a psychotherapist, a marriage and family therapist. I've been in the practice for nearly 40 years,
Right.
and I began to I began to listen to my clients who were saying, "There's not a book. I don't know what to read. What should I read?" And I began to think, maybe I need to write a book because the things that people were reading didn't really line up with the model that I was proposing. So I started to write. I've been a writer actually since I was a small girl.
Okay.
I began writing poetry when I was in third grade. My teacher was lovely and would allow me to read to the class, and but I decided so I started writing stories about couples.
Hmm.
And then I realized that what the best thing that I could do was to begin by writing my own story.
Hmm.
This book is a story. It braids three themes together. It begins on the first day of my own marriage.
Hmm.
And with the expectations that I had about what marriage would be like, and then how I discovered that marriage wasn't exactly what I thought it was.
Okay.
And I decided I was going to, after finding my own marital frustrations, I decided I was going to make myself a marriage expert
Hmm.
and really learn everything I could about what makes marriage tick, because I wasn't doing so well. Many of my clients weren't doing so well, and there had to be more to it. And so I began to study, marriage therapy and theories of brain science and family systems and couple development. And I discovered that one of the biggest difficulties that people have is that they're trying to agree, and what we actually need to do to be successful in couples, as in a marriage,
Right.
is to figure out what to do with ourselves when we disagree.
Hmm.
And so this was really a powerful realization. I realized my husband and I were kind of involved in a kind of a relationship three-legged race where,
Okay.
either one of us could move without the other person reacting or disagreeing or needing to think we had to create consensus.
Right.
So I set about changing my marriage. My husband thought marriage was okay the way it was. He didn't buy into my theories.
Hmm.
So what the book is about is how as a result of my training, I embarked on the process of trying to change my marriage by myself.
Hmm.
So this is the story of my marriage, the story of my training, and then the story of my clients and how they and how, it's stories. Being a writer, there are parts of the book that read more like a novel.
Uh-huh.
There's passages about people, descriptive stories, people's struggles, and so it really is this three-part book: my marriage, my couples, and there's theory in there. So it's reading a self-help book that kind of goes down more like curling. It's like a kind of a good book you sit down and curl up with, rather than really a how-to manual.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So definitely, it's gonna make it easy, a relatively easy read compared to, like, say, this is a textbook on how you do this and how you do that. It's an
Yeah,
easier
it's
read.
definitely, curl up with it. It's a curl up with a good book kind of story. And it has a happy ending, which is always very nice.
All right. Cool. So, Winifred, I mean, what made you decide to write the book? I mean, you didn't have to. I mean, even with all the people saying, I can't find anything out there, you really didn't have to write this book. What made you decide?
Well, yeah, I actually felt honestly that I did have to write this book.
Oh.
I don't know, or I think as writers, many of us really do feel called to write a book.
Mm.
This is my story. I need to tell this story. And I initially started it by writing stories about others.
Mhm.
So I literally wrote 90,000 words. I began writing stories. They were 4 to 5 pages long about various couple struggles that people had.
Right.
Someone struggling with alcohol, someone struggling with fighting, someone struggling with who's going to initiate sex. And after I wrote 90,000 words, I found the book, each little piece was interesting, but as a whole, it was incredibly boring.
Oh.
There were just too many scenes in the same scene in my office. This person takes off their shoes. This person says that. This person turns around. And so I set it aside. And then about a year or two later, I said, I know this story I have to write. I have to write a memoir. I have to write a personal story.
Mm.
Because one of the unique things, and I'm not the only one, so that doesn't make it, it's not unique, but many therapists hide behind a kind of mask of, I'm the professional and you're the patient.
Okay.
And when you're doing marriage therapy, it just doesn't work that way. You can't, we're all in the same boat. And so one of the most reassuring things that I discovered when I began training in therapy was that my teachers would say things like, oh yeah, let me tell you about the ridiculous fight that I have with my spouse. Or, oh yeah, my wife, she never cleans off the dining room table. And it was like, oh, it isn't just me. Marriage is difficult. And so I really wanted a book where right out of the gate, the message was, it's not just you. We all struggle. Here's my story. Here's the story of others. Here's the story of my teachers. I talk about my teachers talking about their arguments and difficulties. And it puts us all, together saying, marriage is hard. Here's how some people do it. Here's an inspirational, idea for you. Here's an empowering idea. Don't keep thinking you need to be, perfectly in line with your spouse. Take a stand, take a move, step out of your comfort zone. So it's encouraging. And I just felt that there really needed to be a book where it dispelled that myth entirely, that there are experts and that there are losers and winners.
Okay, I got that. Interesting. Okay, so let me just go over a couple of topics that you mentioned. First off, you mentioned that couples agree to agree when really they should be handling how they disagree. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so when people agree to disagree, what that means is we can't really come to any kind of conclusion. I can agree to disagree about, which basketball team I'd like to have, see in the Final Four, or whether or not, I like my hamburger well done or medium rare. We can agree to disagree about that stuff, but people can't agree to disagree about whether we're going to have a third child, or whether we're going to move to the country, or, whether we're going to sleep with the window open. I mean, you can't. And so if you're only problem solving, if the thing you deal with when you don't agree is that you just agree to disagree, you're losing traction, because when you come down to a difficult issue, you need to be able to tolerate the difference of opinion. You need to be able to tolerate your spouse disagreeing with you without you feeling like you have to capsize, right, or fight to the death. And it's a fine art of figuring out how to stay connected to your own thoughts and ideas while being open to the other. And so people agree to disagree, but you know what? They're mostly sidestepping important issues because what's really important is that we be able to stand for something, that we not, we can't agree to disagree about whether or not you've had too much to drink and whether you should drive.
Right.
And so people fall back on these, people need to be able to have the grit to take on a certain issue. If I want to have a third child and you don't want to have a third child, how do we decide this? We flip a coin. So I'll end up not having a kid that I want. You'll end up having, more children than you'd like,
Right.
or somebody goes without. And so, these are not easily solved. These are problems that have, that we have to have practice.
Right.
We have to have practice on the smaller things so that when we get to the harder things, we actually know how to be influenced by the other, how to take a stand for ourselves, how to consider that the thing that I want is going to have a cost to you, and how do I justify that? If there's a winner and a loser, and people just say, "Well, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and call the contractor. I don't care what you think."
Mm-hmm.
That what happens is there's a winner and loser, and it destroys trust, and it makes people feel disempowered. So there's an engagement with issues. People have to engage in a certain way. And, so as you notice, I'm not saying, and so here's how you do it,
Mm-hmm.
because there's not a formula for how we take a stand. People take a deep breath and they say, okay, here's my moment. I'm going to speak up. Nobody can give you instructions for that. It just occurs as we develop more courage.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Interesting. All right. Cool. So what's coming out here is that conflicts within a marriage. I mean, they require skills. It requires the kind of skills that have to be developed before the marriage takes place. Like you mentioned, like conflict resolution and all that, and being with you know, really being a stand for something. And it occurs to me that being this, you got to be this before you enter a marriage more than anything
Well,
else.
actually, it's not possible to be this before you enter the marriage. It's like it's like you enter first grade and you're a first grader. And then by the end of first grade, you've learned all the things you need that first grade is going to give you.
Hmm.
We step into marriage pretty much. I like to, this is one of the ways I describe it,
Like,
which is that we step into marriage fully unprepared.
okay.
Marriage basically puts two people into a small space,
Hmm.
with the expectation of keeping them there for a lifetime, and then just says, "Okay, good luck to you." It doesn't come with a map or an instruction manual, so we hit the ground running and we learn on the job. No one can know how I run my marriage can't be the same way that you run your marriage. We have to figure it out. The two of us kind of get into this small space, and then what's next is a mystery. I think that the better prepared people are for the adventure of marriage,
Right.
the better they do. I once wrote a blog post for the Huffington Post called Seven Things About Marriage That I Wish I'd Known as a Newlywed. And these were only things that I could have learned, but after 30 years of marriage.
Hmm.
Because so we can't know these things. You can't know that, sex isn't going to stay sizzling and dramatic for 30 years without great effort.
Right.
You can't know this. Or you can't know that eventually the stupid things that you feel like you have to fight to the death are irrelevant. You can't know that going in.
Mm-hmm.
We all have to learn these things.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Got that. Interesting. Now you mentioned something about a model that you present in your book. What is this model all about?
Okay, it's a developmental model that has been devised by two psychotherapists who run something called the Couples Institute in Menlo Park, California.
Okay.
And it's Ellen Bader and Peter Pearson. It's their model, and it's a developmental model of couples therapy and of couples relationships. And essentially, it's based on that there are 5 stages of marriage. The first stage is like the courtship stage, where everything is the same. We agree about everything. You know that thing when you're falling in love and you just can't believe you have finally met somebody who also drinks orange juice in the morning. It
Right.
is just a remarkable thing. And both of you like to stay up and watch the same reruns, and you think you have basically finally met your person.
Right.
And that's a lovely stage. And then it inevitably ends. and so what reemerges is difference.
Hmm.
Well, like my husband, when we were first getting together, he would take the sports section of the newspaper and read it in the bathroom because he didn't really want me to know what a fanatic he was.
Hmm.
And so we hide these parts of ourselves. Or you have to be around somebody for a long time to know that they get up in the middle of the night and need ice cream, and they're just there are all these things that you just don't know in courtship because everything is about creating the we, the us. And then the second stage is where you start to recognize it's the reemergence of difference,
Okay.
and start to say, well, actually, I don't like opera. I like to have sex with the lights on.
Hmm.
I don't really like driving with the top down on the car.
Hmm.
But I think you said you like that. Well, yeah, and then there's conflict,
Hmm.
and it's not necessarily knock down, drag out fights, although lots of people have those. It can just be difference and difficulty, and then people say, maybe she's not the person I thought she was. And this is a place where a lot of relationships fall apart. People think, I'm going to go find somebody with whom that first stage lasts forever.
Hmm.
And it doesn't last forever. It cannot last. It does not last because eventually we can't keep submerging these parts of ourselves.
Right.
So people have to go through that. So that's the second stage. Then there's the third stage where people can express their own feelings and tolerate their differences and do better they can have a conflict and they can get through it. And then comes a period of more separateness.
Hmm.
You have you're not so deeply engaged with the person that now you can say, I really want to go out with my girlfriends on Thursday, every week. I want to be in a book group.
Hmm.
Or I'd really like to go on this camping trip, or I'm going to go to the car show, or that sort of thing. And I don't really want to, and well, I don't really want to do that, but that's okay. You go. There's a little more separateness where we return to our own separate interests,
Hmm.
and then and that's a stage, and then people kind of move back toward one another, and in the end, there's a kind of mutual sense of, I feel whole and solid in myself, and I can want things, and I can have, you can want things, but there's a longing to reconnect. So it's kind of, we start like totally like tied to each other. We move more separate, and then we return to a deeper connection where you have two whole and solid people who can stand apart and stay connected to one another at the same time. So those are the developmental stages. And that informed my own development in terms of working with my own marriage. It's not like I said, okay, now we're going to work on stage 2 or 3. They evolve as you proceed through the process that each stage entails. It's so you sort of find yourself at the next stage.
Hmm. Okay, so I can see then that there's there really is no way to prepare for marriage. You just really learn as you go.
There is no way to prepare for it because it doesn't exist. I wasn't married until I was married. It was,
True.
so I couldn't practice for it. I could imagine things. I thought my husband and I were going to be pretty good problem solvers.
Hmm.
We're both really logical, practical people. We have similar values, and we had lots of willingness. I had no idea we would end up fighting about things, the most ridiculous of which is, who started this argument? I mean, like, or I've talked to friends, and as I've written the book, I needed examples of, what do you fight about?
Right.
And people said to me, oh, you know what we fight about? We fight about who's not listening. We fight about, somebody else said she fights about who brought the tension into the room. It's like, I was fine, and then you came in and you were tense. No, I wasn't tense. You brought the tension into the room. I mean, people fight about nothing.
Hmm.
People don't fight about anything. Really serious issues, people don't fight. People don't fight about whether or not, they should take another round of chemotherapy,
Right.
or whether you call the fire department when your house is on fire. People don't fight about these things. They fight about where are we going to put the olive oil, and why do you always drive the most inefficient way to the freeway, or you should park here. Don't tell me what to do. So we fight about nonsense.
Hmm.
And so you can't prepare for that. You have to figure out what are you gonna do with this stuff. I had no idea my husband and I were going to be so ridiculous, and I thought we were really sane and practical people.
Right. Okay. Interesting. You got that. But it occurs to me that a lot of the stuff that, based on what you say, a lot of the stuff that people fight about tend to be kind of trivial. But
Yeah,
is there usually a deeper underlying issue that the trivial thing is actually just a smokescreen for that deeper issue?
perfect, precisely. Yes, that's absolutely true. It's what I call the big picture. We can fight about little picture issues like where to put the olive oil or which way to hang the toilet paper. But what people are really fighting about are whether or not I'm valued by you,
Hmm.
whether or not I can trust you,
Hmm.
whether or not you think highly of me,
Hmm.
whether we fight about commitment, and it's not just whether we're going to stay married or not, but in the middle of a fight, if you have a partner in the middle of an argument, even if you're arguing about which way to park,
Right.
and the person chronically just bails out, that's a commitment fight. Why don't you hang in there with me? And so, well, I just don't care. And so people end up saying, you're not invested. You just give up. And so people fight about these bigger picture issues. We fight about who's in control, who's got power, who feels weak, who overpowers whom. We fight about trust. On the big picture, we fight about trust. Why do you have a password on your telephone? Or trust on an issue, like constantly I hear people say, yeah, he says he calls me from the parking lot from work and he says, okay, I'm on my way home. And then he's not home for half an hour. And he says, well, I ran into somebody in the parking lot and I stood there talking. Yeah, but you told me you were going to be coming home. I can't count on you.
Mhm.
And people get all worked up. I can't count on you. Well, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just talking to George. I mean, like, why are you all over my case? And so this is this is about power. This is about trust.
Hmm.
And so people can't solve their problems until they actually know, what are we really fighting about?
Hmm.
Often people are fighting about selfhood. You're not taking me seriously, or you think I'm stupid, or whether or not your spouse thinks you're stupid. People say it all the time. Why does he have to tell me, where to park? Doesn't he think I'm intelligent enough? It has nothing to do with that. These are issues of selfhood. So what if I get into the parking lot and my husband says, I think you should park over there, and I say, well, I think I like this spot. I can park where I want to park. This is not, I don't care if he says, well, I think this is ridiculous because we're going to get rained on over here or whatever. And I say, yeah, okay, I can move the car. Or I say, yeah, I think let's just stay here. So these are, but you have to know what you're actually fighting about.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Ye-
That these big picture issues, and they dominate people because you don't know. I ask people this question. I say, when you're in the middle of one of your things, ask yourself, what's really going on here?
Hmm.
What's going on? And so they might say, okay, what's going on? I sometimes say, tell me everything that's true about this, as a way to find out what's the big picture, what's true. Okay, we start with what's true. I think he's being ridiculous. What else is true? I feel powerless. What else is true? I think he never listens to me.
Mhm.
What else is true? And they go through the whole list, and then they start to get the picture of what is actually going on. Because you could spend your life talking about, you could spend your life talking about where to park.
Right. True. Yeah, especially if no one wants to give.
So actually, I need to end this call. We hit the end of our time, but it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Okay, hey, no problem. I got that you've got a whole list of interviews to do, so no problem. Okay, so
Yeah,
let me just close then. In closing then, the book is It Takes One to Tango: How I Rescued My Marriage with Almost No Help from My Spouse, and How You Can Too. The authors are guest Winifred Reilly, and the website is at onetotango.com. That's onetotango.com. No numbers, all letters. Thank you for your time. It was definitely
yes,
insightful having you here with us today.
it's been a pleasure.
All right, cool.
Bye bye.
Good luck. Bye. So if any of you listeners want to know more about this potentially marriage-saving topic, please feel free to go ahead and check out It Takes One to Tango: How I Rescued My Marriage with Almost No Help from My Spouse, and How You Can Too, which you can do so right now by going to the Amazon link in the description below the video. And if you'd like to follow our author interviews on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. So bye for now. I'll be back on Author Story weekly interviews with another inspiring author.